As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
In one of his first acts after returning to office, President Donald Trump signed an executive order aimed at redefining how the federal government addresses gender and sexuality. The result? A sweeping removal of transgender references and LGBTQ+ resources from federal websites. This decision has sparked outrage, confusion, and concern across the nation. Let's break it all down. On January 20th, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order titled Defending Women and Upholding Biological Sex. The order directed federal agencies to remove all content that promotes or references gender ideology, a term often used by critics to describe transgender rights and inclusivity efforts. The administration framed this as a move to protect women and uphold what they called the truth of biological sex. But for many, it was seen as an attack on the LGBTQ+ community, particularly transgender individuals. The order gave federal agencies until 5 p.m. on January 31st to comply. And comply they did. Agencies across the government began scrubbing websites, removing pages, and altering language to eliminate references to transgender people and LGBTQ+ issues. The speed and scale of the changes left many stunned as critical resources vanished overnight. The impact of the executive order was immediate and far-reaching. Here are some specific examples of how federal agencies implemented the directive. The State Department modified its webpage for LGBTQI+ travelers, shortening the acronym to just LGB, removing the T for transgender, the Q for queer, and the I for intersex. While the content on the page remained largely the same, the erasure of these identities sent a clear message. Transgender, queer, and intersex individuals were no longer acknowledged or supported by the federal government. This move is emblematic of a broader effort to delegitimize non-cisgender identities, framing them as incompatible with the administration's vision of biological truth. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, took down several pages related to transgender health, including resources on LGBTQ+ youth suicide, diabetes in the LGBTQ+ community, and supporting transgender youth. These pages provided critical information for vulnerable populations, and their removal has left many wondering where to turn for help. For example, the CDC's page on LGBTQ+ youth suicide prevention was a lifeline for countless young people and their families. Its disappearance has sparked fears of a potential rise in mental health crises among transgender youth. The removal of these resources underscores the administration's disregard for the well-being of marginalized communities. Even the National Institutes of Health's Office for Sexual and Gender Minority Research saw its website vanish. This office was a hub for critical research on the health disparities faced by LGBTQ+ individuals, particularly transgender and non-binary people. Its removal not only erases valuable data, but also undermines efforts to address systemic inequities in healthcare. By dismantling this office, the administration is effectively silencing the voices of researchers and advocates who have worked tirelessly to improve health outcomes for LGBTQ+ individuals. The State Department also removed the option to select X as a gender marker on passport applications. This change effectively freezes gender-neutral passports, forcing non-binary individuals to choose between male or female, a move that many see as a direct attack on their identity. For non-binary people, this decision is more than an inconvenience. It's a denial of their existence. This policy shift reflects a broader trend of erasing non-binary and gender non-conforming individuals from public life, reinforcing a rigid binary view of gender that excludes countless people. In the rush to comply with the executive order, some unrelated pages were also affected. For example, the CDC's Atlas Plus tool for HIV data and the Census Bureau's website temporarily went offline, sparking confusion and frustration. These tools are essential for researchers, policymakers, and advocates working to address public health crises like HIV/AIDS. Their removal, even if temporary, highlights the chaotic and far-reaching consequences of the administration's actions. This collateral damage demonstrates the recklessness of the executive order and its potential to disrupt critical government functions. The decision was met with swift backlash from LGBTQ plus advocacy groups who condemned the executive order as an act of censorship and erasure. GLAAD, one of the largest LGBTQ plus media advocacy organizations, called the move censorship and accused the Trump administration of trying to erase LGBTQ plus Americans from public life. The National Center for Lesbian Rights, NCLR, and GLAAD Law filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court, arguing that the executive order is unconstitutional and rooted in animus toward transgender people. The lawsuit claims that the order violates the First Amendment by censoring speech and the Fifth Amendment by denying equal protection under the law. Legal experts predict that the case could eventually reach the Supreme Court, setting the stage for a landmark decision on transgender rights. The implications of this decision go far beyond website changes. For transgender individuals, especially youth, the removal of health resources and support materials can be devastating. Studies have shown that access to affirming healthcare and information can be life-saving for transgender people who face disproportionately high rates of suicide and mental health challenges. For example, a 2022 study by the Trevor Project found that 45% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered suicide in the past year, with transgender and non-binary youth at even higher risk. The removal of resources like the CDC's LGBTQ+ Youth Suicide Prevention page could exacerbate this crisis, leaving young people without access to critical support. Additionally, the executive order has reignited debates about transgender military service. President Trump's order also targeted diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives in the military, banning the use of invented pronouns and reinforcing a binary view of gender. This has left thousands of transgender service members in limbo, unsure of their futures. For many, the military is not just a career, but a calling, and this decision feels like a betrayal. This move is part of a broader pattern for the Trump administration, which has consistently rolled back protections for LGBTQ+ individuals. During his first term, Trump attempted to ban transgender people from serving in the military and rescinded Obama-era guidelines protecting transgender students. Now, in his second term, he's taking these efforts even further. Critics argue that this isn't just about policy. It's about sending a message. By erasing transgender people from federal websites and policies, the administration is effectively denying their existence and legitimacy. For many, this feels like a step backward in the fight for equality. So, what happens now? Advocacy groups are fighting back in the courts, and many are working to archive and preserve the resources that have been removed. Organizations like the Internet Archive and grassroots activists are scrambling to save copies of deleted web pages, ensuring that the information remains accessible to those who need it. Social media campaigns are also spreading awareness, with hashtags like Chaos Trans Rights are Human Rights and Protect Trans Kids trending on platforms like Twitter and Instagram. Individuals are stepping up to fill the gaps left by the government, sharing resources and offering support to those affected. In Congress, lawmakers are introducing bills to counteract the executive order. The Equality Act, which would explicitly prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, has gained renewed momentum. However, with a divided Congress, its passage remains uncertain.